So I'm so excited, like I've said 75 million times, about being here because this is a really cool panel because we're talking about social media as a full-time career. So I know there are many layers and complexities when we talk about social media, from content creation to marketing to strategy. We're going to get into all of that. But what I want to focus on today, we have three social media experts ranging from editorial to music to branded content, film, TV, all the things. And we did that intentionally because, as you know, if you think about a career in social media, different things could be different at different companies, depending on the content they focus on, the demographic they serve, et cetera. So we want to make sure that you leave here today with a full understanding, feeling inspired and empowered to pursue this field and career, because as you know, it's a huge part of our culture and business, right? So before we start that, I do want the panelists to introduce themselves and just tell us your name, the company you work for, and just a general tidbit about what your role is, what you do. We'll start with Morgan, then Ernestine, then Jasper.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you again for being here. This is going to be a fun panel. My name is Morgan Rojas, and I am the head of PR and social media manager for Pretty Bird and for Ventureland. And I wear many hats, which we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, primarily, I'm the only one that works on socials for both companies, and so it's a lot, but it's very fun, and I'm excited to learn from the other panelists too.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ernestine Frazier, and I am the senior social media manager for Teen Vogue under Condé Nast. Same as Morgan, I wear a lot of different hats that we can definitely get into later, but I am really excited to be here. I am a CSU alumni as well, so really excited to talk to everyone today.
And hey everyone, I'm Jasper Bernbaum. I work for a company called Versus Creative, which is a social and creative firm based in LA. And we work primarily with a lot of music clients and people in the music industry, but have branched out to all different kinds of areas. We've worked with some clothing brands before. We've worked with a lot of tech companies. My role is the director of creative and content strategy. And like our other panelists, I have to wear a lot of hats. So we'll get into that because there's a lot to social media nowadays.
Oh yeah. And if you're on the call and your field or your aspiration doesn't fall in any of these fields, it'll be just general information that's really applicable to any field, any industry or company. These are just their personal perspectives and expertise, so just keep that in mind. So my very first question I start every panel with, and I know it's the burning question of most people here, people just want to know, like, what led you here? Like, how did you get to this job, this career role, this journey? And I think journey and stories are important. So this is a question I do want each of you to answer in no particular order. If you could just explain, what was your first job in this industry? How did you know you wanted to work in social media? Like, what's your journey to now? What led you here?
Cool. Well, I can just start that one. So my first job actually was at 15. I was a news reporter for a local cable station in LA. I was born and raised in LA, in El Segundo, down by LAX airport, if you're familiar with the area. And I always loved creating videos and editing on my own and being in front of the camera and interviewing people and just having that responsibility to create something of my own. And so I started in video production in high school and went to college. I went to Chapman University for film and broadcast journalism and continued down that path thinking that I wanted to be a news reporter, which that didn't get very far because once I realized in the real world what that entailed of waking up at like 3 a.m. and nonstop working hours, it was a bit much. So I kind of took that knowledge and created this job that I could use those skills and create content and interviews, but just on my own terms, not at 3 a.m., which was great. So yeah, that was kind of the first job, was luckily in video production. I found that I gravitated towards that very early on. And yeah, have been doing it in different ways, but still doing it ever since.
I can go next. My first job in this field, I started out as a programming assistant for a video company called Tastemade, which they do like cooking videos that like you see on Facebook and stuff like that. I sort of didn't really know what I wanted to do after I graduated from college. I went to Cal State Long Beach, and then I was kind of lost after that. So I went back to school and I got my master's from Syracuse University. And while I was there, I was taking a lot of social media classes, which I thought was really interesting. As somebody, like I'm sure many of you have grown up on the internet and are a part of internet culture. That was something that I was always a part of since I was like a teenager. And then I just thought, like, why not make a career out of that? So yeah, my first job was a programming assistant, and then I was promoted to a content strategist. But that first job, really, I learned just so much about like the different aspects of social media. I think there's only like so much you can learn like in school, but like once you're like in the field or like in your job, you just have to sort of like pick things up as you go. So I'm really grateful for that first job too.
And yeah, very similar to Morgan. I actually also went to film school at Chapman University, which is where we met. And I was always really into film. I was always really into kind of just like art and making and creating stuff, you know, from growing up from a very early age. So in high school, I was in my journalism class and did a bunch of photography, and I was always kind of trying to find ways to kind of combine those two things. So I went to film school and then kind of did, you know, the on-set kind of stuff after I graduated. I worked on a couple television shows, worked in script development for a year. And then as I was kind of doing that, I was working as like just on the side as like a concert photographer for a lot of like music publications, Fact Mag, Stereo Gum, a bunch of kind of more independent minded ones. And because of that, a friend of mine who worked at Versus Creative, where I work now, was like, hey, you should, you know, join the team. And I wasn't really like looking to work in social media per se. I saw it more as like an outlet to, you know, create content for other people, and people that I really admired and respected. A lot of the clients that they were working with, and we still work with at the time, or we still work with now. It was just fun to be like, oh, like social media is the new kind of distribution outlet in a sense. It's a way to get work seen, and it's a way to kind of create and make stuff, because that's just, you know, people need content. People need to post stuff. It was around that time, kind of like 2016, 2017, where like it was really taking off. So I started at Versus just as an account coordinator, which was kind of more kind of just on the calendaring and kind of, you know, ideation side, making sure posts were going up and being executed. And it slowly just kind of evolved into more developing and directing content and ideating and on a higher level basis. So kind of a more roundabout path into this field, but still, you know, there's no straight path into any kind of thing you want to do, I feel like. So
perfect segue to my next comment. There is no straight path. And I think I say that on every panel too. And the reason why I have people share their stories is because everyone's journey is very different about how they end up in the fields they end up in. And I just want you to understand your journey is yours, and it can look all sorts of different ways. There's not a follow X plus Y equals Z formula to this industry. So to that, I know each of you have different titles because you work for different types of companies. So I do want everyone on the call to understand that there's different roles in social media. It's not just, I'm a social media blank and we all do the same thing. It's so multifaceted, it's so complex. Like you said before, you wear different hats. So if each of you could just explain what your title is, so they understand the different titles involved, and what your day-to-day looks like what are you doing in that role, so they can understand the different types of things that social media entails. So just explain, you know, what your role, what your title is, and what that entails day to day.
Yeah, so for social media, it's funny because technically my title is social media manager, but I'm the only one doing it, so I kind of manage myself. But what that means, I guess, to me is being able to come up with the idea, creating the idea, and following it through and posting it and having it just kind of be incubated in my brain. But what really helps is getting, when we have interns in at Pretty Bird and at Ventureland, having their help with coming up with just different ideas, and even people who have different editing skills and can use Photoshop and all of that is very helpful, because I will confess that I'm like a Canva queen. I love it. That's like what I know best. And it makes it so easy, which is nice, because designing can be hard. So that's kind of the social media side of it. With that though, I also run the PR department at Pretty Bird and Ventureland. And social media and PR is similar but different, in that PR is, the end goal is exposure for your company, and social media is a tool that we use to promote a director's music video or a director's television show or a film that we're doing. And it's a vital tool that PR needs. And social media is seen as, a great way an organic way to get PR and get your film or your project into the hands and the eyeballs of so many people. So again, kind of with PR, like technically my title is the head of PR, where I oversee a very small team, sometimes just one other person. But I mean, also with that too, I'm in charge of the award submissions for Pretty Bird and Ventureland. And that also in a way ties into kind of all of the other things that I'm doing, where whenever we get some nomination or something, like currently we're hearing back on the Shots Awards that they just announced their nominees this past week. And Pretty Bird was fortunate enough to get nominated for about 12 different awards. And so as the PR manager, I'm writing, a press release to post on the website, but as the social media manager, I'm coming up with how a post could look to share on our socials. And is it going to be a story, or is it going to be a post? And what does that look like? So they all work together, like the synergy is all there. They can be a bit different at times, but I think they all work together pretty well. And so those are a few of the hats I wear.
So my title is a senior social media manager, and from a publication standpoint, it's very broad, and it kind of just depends on, like, my day-to-day depends on what like the news cycle looks like that week. So sometimes it'll be focusing on whatever like top stories are happening in the world right now. Other days it'll be focused on like a new like movie coming out or something. Every day is different, and it's fun though, because there's so many different facets of social media that I work in. I focus a lot on strategy, our overall strategy across all of our different platforms. If there's like a special event that we need to go to and we need social content for that, I'll like go to those and capture content. It just really depends on like what's going on that week. So it really keeps you on your toes in the publishing world, because you honestly like just never know what to expect or what you're going to be like working on until like it happens.
Definitely relate to kind of both what Ernestine and Morgan were saying. It's social media is definitely like, what does my day-to-day look like? I this weekend, like somebody was like, I still don't understand what you do, when I had to explain it to them. And I think that there's like something really fun and exciting about that, in that like your day is going to look different most days. And I guess in my role, like kind of both of the panelists are saying, it's like a hybrid of a lot of things. On one hand, it's very like managerial, like overseeing projects and on like a higher level, and saying like, okay, like what is the story we want to tell? What's the voice of this project? Like, how do we take this brand and how do they show up on social in a meaningful way for followers and the communities that they're already speaking to? But also, what are the communities that we're not speaking to that we can speak to? Like there's that kind of like higher level brand thinking, but then there's also just like on a post basis, like if there's something trending going on, it's like, okay, how do we respond to this trend that's going on? Do we respond to it? Is it something that it feels like we should create something to? Because you shouldn't feel like you should respond to everything that's happening in the world. Sometimes it's not appropriate for you to respond to something. So on one hand, there's that. And then on the second hand, there's like the creative side of like, okay, so how do we take this kind of strategy and this voice work that we've done and execute it and say, like, think about like visually how are people consuming, what is the user behavior on a specific platform, like thinking platform to platform, like TikTok's different than Twitter and Twitter's different than Instagram and Instagram's different than YouTube. It's like you have to think of everything in a very different capacity. It's not just as simple as like, oh, crop that video vertical from YouTube to TikTok. It's like it doesn't just work that way. There's people use different platforms in a different way. So a lot of my role is like thinking platform to platform, like how do we create the best engagement and how do we create the most engaging content based on how users are thinking and behaving and all that stuff, and then most importantly how the brand or entity or artist wants to show up on social.
Thank you. And I don't know if our panelists have seen Emily in Paris. Do you have any Emily in Paris fans? So I saw this article on LinkedIn. Everyone's like, wow, she has such a cool career. And then I heard all these social media experts start chiming in saying, that's not what my job looks like. That is like all fake. Like, no, it's glorified. And so I thought that was so funny. I don't work in social media, obviously, but I thought they were going in on this Emily in Paris post. So I want to talk a bit about the common misconceptions, because I think a lot of people don't fully understand, content creation is huge, but that's just one piece of your job, right? Like it's not just showing up, creating content and going home. And so I do want people to understand the difference between being a content creator, like making like monetizing content creation, and then having social media for a reputable company or brand as a career. So can we talk a little bit about the common misconceptions and just debunk them so we have a full understanding of what it actually means to work in this field full time?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest misconception is that it's easy. A lot of people use social media in their spare time or for leisure, and it's easy to just kind of swipe through things. But knowing how much time it takes to come up with an idea and to make it come to life, it's a lot of work. And it's also hard in any sort of creative field. It's hard to be expected to produce like creative ideas every single day, because we all have days where, ideas are flowing and we're feeling really good and we're writing everything down. And then I'm sure there are days when we have writer's block and it's like, oh, nothing sounds good today. And it's difficult to kind of stay creative. And I was talking with Ara, who actually is the Pipeline social media manager, and we were kind of saying the same thing. Like it's difficult to come up with new, unique, fresh ideas every day. So I would say that's probably the biggest misconception, at least for me. I kind of like what Jasper was saying. Like I didn't necessarily know I wanted to work in social media. It's kind of a part of a larger role here. But I've learned, I've learned so much, and being able to follow different accounts on Instagram mostly is kind of where we focus. The Provincial Land focus is there. Being able to follow some of those accounts and just spark ideas that way has been really helpful. But yeah, I would say sometimes people can tend to underestimate the time and the value of like a really good social post.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Morgan. I think in my entire career in any job that I've ever worked in, I feel like people don't understand social media and they think you just like take a picture and post something and then that's it. But there's like a lot of thought that goes behind it, and making sure that, you know, like the language you're using is appropriate to the brand that you're, you know, working for and stuff like that. It's also like, I think another big misconception is that just because you're working for a brand doesn't necessarily mean that whatever you post will go viral. And I think that's a big misconception, especially with TikTok and just how the whole platform works. But just because, you know, you're a part of this brand, it doesn't mean that your content's like gonna hit. And there has to be like a lot of thoughtfulness behind it. And yeah, there's just a lot of work and different moving parts. You know, you're talking to like a video team that's like, and the editing team that's like editing your videos, and, you know, just making sure all these things are aligned before you put your content out into the world. But yeah, I get that all the time too. Like I'll tell my friends, like, I'll have like a stressful day at work and they'll be like, well, don't you just like post? And it's like, no, there's a lot more that goes into it than just posting.
Yeah, completely agree with everything that's been said. It's not just posting to Facebook, which is what I think a lot of people, when I first started at Versus, my boss, one of the partners of the company, would always say like, people just think we're posting to Facebook, and it's so much more than that, which is, you know, says it all. You know, it's social media is kind of like the front lines now for brands and artists and whomever. You know, that's how they show up to the world. So there's a lot of thought that goes behind it. And you know, and it's very different than your personal social media. I think your personal social media, you are the one and only person who controls that, and it can be whatever you want it to be, and that's how it should be. With a larger brand or artist or whomever you're working with company, there's a lot, you know, that you need to think about and a lot that you need to create. And I think something you were saying about like TikTok, people expect it to go viral. It's like, I think something that we have to teach people too is like, not every post is going to be a home run. Like some posts are just going to be a little single, you know. It's like every post has a different purpose. Some are very informational, some are just fun, you know, and I think that's all part of the story you're trying to tell. And you know, there's highs, there's lows. It's just like that's part of the game, and it's not just all fun and posting, you know, to get likes and engagement. It's a very kind of, and it's a revolving door too. Like you have to constantly kind of like think like, ooh, how do we respond to this? Do we respond to this? So it can get very exhausting, to be frank. It's not all fun and games. It can be extremely exhausting. So I think those are kind of some of the challenges that I've definitely faced, and it sounds like the other Morgan and Honesty have also faced as well.
You reminded me actually of something that I feel like there's two kind of distinct tracks in this field. Like there's one that can be a little bit more heavy on the creative and the idea, the content creation side, Shari, like you were saying, and there's also more of the producer side. My brother actually works in social media as well for Netflix, and he is purely like a producer. And so he's in charge of getting assets to editors to kind of carry out someone else's vision for social media. And so he's involved in that world, but he's not coming up with the idea that you'll see on like the Netflix film Instagram or something, but he's still very much in it by being like a post producer. So that's another avenue too that's interesting if you're interested in social media but feel like, I don't know, content creation isn't necessarily the path you want to go. That's definitely like a cool route worth exploring.
No, thank you. And that just inspired another question. And if we could just briefly touch on it, is analytics. Woo! Analytics, strategy and analytics. We never hear about that. And it's such a huge part of your roles, right? Like content creation, we hear all about, we never hear much about algorithm, analytics, strategy. So can we talk briefly about how those three things play a part in like why it's so crucial and important, like how you use that data and analytics and strategy to create posts that resonate with your audience? Can we talk briefly about that?
Yeah. What's interesting on my front specifically is that the social media I'm doing, I'm kind of more reactionary. So I will post to share projects that directors have completed, or if if the CEO has done an interview with a magazine, I'll share that. So it's great when we get a ton of views and a ton of likes, because that just boosts the visibility of the project or, the piece of work. But it's not necessarily, we're not necessarily focused on like keeping up with news trends, like that. The bulk of our posts are more just celebrating the work and a highlight reel, if you will, like of the company. So yeah, analytics don't entirely drive my work, but I have noticed though, like when I do time a post to something that's relevant, like a holiday, or if there's something like the Oscars. So our two directors that Pretty Bird represents, the Daniels, they won a ton of awards at the Oscars this year, which was amazing. And so a lot of social posts were dedicated to them and having to stay kind of on top of that news as it was breaking in real time. And I noticed that those posts tended to do a lot better than some of, the other posts I had done previously if it wasn't tied to something specific. So those numbers were great. Everyone was very happy with all of that. So yeah, I guess it's kind of a mix. But long story short, I kind of just am more reactionary with the posts that I do for Pretty Bird Adventureland.
Yeah, I think the analytics part of it definitely depends on where you're working and what the goals of the company that you're working for are, because everyone's KPIs are different. So like one company I worked for, their KPIs were focused on impressions. Another company I worked for, their focus was on like video views, and like another one on traffic. It really just depends on what their focus is and like what the goals they're trying to hit like with those analytics. And then from there, you can sort of like inform your strategy around those goals and figure out, how can I be creative in order to drive traffic back to the site? Or like, how can I be creative to like boost our video views? I think, yeah, it's just really dependent on where you go, because everywhere I've been has like, everyone's always had a different goal. Sometimes analytics are super crucial. And then there are other times where companies just don't care at all and just want like to be seen on social media. So I think like establishing those goals are really important. And then from there, you can sort of figure out your strategy after that.
Yeah, agree on both fronts. I think what I would add is that I think analytics to me is where you see your windows for opportunity, as opposed to kind of like, I mean, it's a great way to like see your successes and stuff, but I really think it's the best way to see like, okay, like what are the things I'm always fascinated by what are the things that like could do just a bit better. And like those are the things that I think are like kind of resonating with an audience, but that's how we find a new audience. Like for example, we worked with a company called Discogs, which is a vinyl marketplace. Actually one of the biggest music resellers on the internet. And they, when we got brought on, we no longer weren't working that project anymore, but when we got brought on just before the pandemic, they were kind of leaning into kind of like the old record collector, the Pink Floyds, the Rolling Stones of the world. But as we were kind of working on that project, we started to realize like hey, there's a lot of young people who are into this. So we started to incorporate, posts about some more experimental, some younger artists, people like Aaliyah, Bjork, more female artists too, and those became our largest posts. And it grabbed a completely new audience and brought more people into the site, which was their KPI, not social engagement. They were like, how do we get more people, new people into the site, more active people into the site? So I think that analytics are a way to not only just like see like, oh, what's working. It's like, okay, like what could work a little bit better? What are those what are the small little brackets of audiences that we're not capturing fully, and how do we like lean into those? So I think that that's where I like to really look at analytics, and it also is a way to see like where the future of your brand. I think in summation, kind of where the future of your brand is trending. I think is where I like to look at in any kind of analytics.
A couple of you mentioned KPIs, and I always just like to spell out the acronyms for people on the call who may be like, what the heck is a KPI? Can we just explain that? Because I like to bring things full circles. I know somebody on this call is like, I don't know what a KPI is. So can we explain what that is?
Yeah, a KPI, it stands for key performance indicator, and it's basically the numbers that you're looking at.
Hopefully no one tries to come to the team.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just the number that you're looking at just to kind of see like the health of your different platforms, and if there's like a certain KPI that you're trying to reach, which is like a certain goal or a number you're trying to hit, that sort of tells you, that's sort of like your baseline, and then can kind of help you with keeping up with those stats and your performance.
Thank you. I got you on the acronyms, y'all. Okay, so if you're on this call and maybe you're, doing social media on a very personal level, to Jasper's point, because this is very different when you enter the professional realm. So if you're on this call and you're doing, you feel like you got a rhythm down personally, and you want to learn more about how to break into this industry on a professional level, or maybe you are working in social media to some capacity, you want to level up, what kinds of things could they be doing right now to prepare for this type of career? And we all know, like we said earlier, it's not linear, right? Like it's many different ways you can fall into this type of career, but is there a way that they can get noticed or they can stand out as they apply to these types of jobs, and maybe don't have a ton of experience? Like, what could they be doing now? What's your biggest piece of advice to prepare for this type of career?
My biggest piece of advice is networking goes a really long way. I have a lot of college students that reach out to me on LinkedIn, and they'll hit me up and just ask like, hey, can I talk to you for like 30 minutes and just ask you a few questions about your job? And I'm always happy to answer it. But I think networking is really key, because you don't really know like where your colleagues are going to end up, or if like that one call that you did with somebody you reached out to on LinkedIn could lead to like another job opportunity. Networking honestly has helped me so much in my career, and just reaching out to other people and just asking questions and keeping interest in what other people are doing. I would also say, I think for me personally, the biggest thing when I like manage different accounts is making sure that we come off as authentic. I think authenticity is super important. And so I think doing a lot of like social listening, seeing what people are talking about on social media, seeing, like what the discourse is for the week, and seeing like how people are reacting to that sort of gives me a better way to understand like, oh, I don't think I should post this. Like this will come off as like cringy, or like, I think people will resonate with this. So I think doing a lot of like social media listening and staying on top of like the trends, but just and knowing who your audience is and figuring that out is also really important too.
Yeah, that actually reminded me, yesterday there was a really good interview on KCRW's Greater LA, and the host of that podcast, or the show, interviewed the anonymous guy behind the meme account Americana at Brand. I don't know if you're familiar or you follow it on Instagram. It's very funny. It's very nuanced and very niche. But this interview was great because this guy was saying that when he started this company or this meme account, he didn't think he would get over 1,000 followers. It was very niche to just literally the Americana Mall in Glendale. And it grew so much because he was able to make these very specific references that a ton of people understood, and he related to them by being authentic to who he was. And it's a really good interview. It's probably, I don't know, 5-10 minutes max. Highly recommend listening to it. I think you can find it on like KCRW. But as far as kind of getting maybe a foot in the door, one thing that helped me land the job here at Pretty Bird Adventureland is when I was applying, I went onto the social pages that were currently in existence. And I did a I kind of made my own deck, and I did a side-by-side of what the current socials looked like with the captions and everything that it looked like as it was. And then on the other side, I recreated all of that and showed how I would do it, and the captions I would use, and the fonts I would choose, and even the sizing of the font. And throughout the interview process, when I presented this deck to my now boss, she immediately saw like, okay, this visually, I can see the changes that you want to do. I like it. And, you know, here's the job. So that was great. And I think a visual component, if you are applying or in that process, is it's kind of unbeatable, because it can show your employer, your potential employer, exactly the changes you want to do. And taking that initiative, especially when it's not asked of you up front, would be, yeah, just kind of a good suggestion, I think.
Yeah, bouncing off what Morgan said, I think, well, two thoughts. One is like not being afraid to be honest in terms of like, I think when I was interviewing at Versus a while ago, I think one of the reasons that my now boss and I clicked was, I was kind of just very candid about kind of some of the things I was being interviewed and asked about. And a lot of it was about kind of like the music world at the time and kind of how I felt about it. And I think that having an honest and original perspective is super key in social. And also being able to have an original perspective on a lot of different parts of for us, popular culture, but for whatever you work in, whether it be tech, finance, whatever, having some sort of new and original and fresh perspective, because that's what social is like, it is, you are having to come up with a fresh perspective almost every single day or refine your perspective. So if you're looking too much into the past and you kind of show that you're a little bit looking backwards, I think that that's maybe a little bit less, desirable, and people want to see somebody who's looking to innovate and looking how to improve and who can contribute something new to the conversation. I think that's really important, whether when you're interviewing or showing, building a portfolio, things like that. It's very, very important. And then I had another thing, but I'll be honest, I lost my train of thought as I was talking. So maybe it'll come back to me.
And to that, I think someone mentioned earlier about authenticity and relatability, because I do think that was such an important point. Even if you are working for a brand or a company, like audiences want to feel like they can relate to what's being posted and that it doesn't feel fake or performative. But that's hard, right? Like if you work for a company or a brand, you have your own, we have our own personal brand, right? Like who Shari is. And then if I'm working for a company, can you talk a little bit about the challenge? How do you overcome that challenge of making sure that you always remain authentic and relatable without interjecting your own opinions or your own perspective if you do have some misalignment? Like, how does that work? Like, how do you always remain fresh and authentic and relatable? What are some of your inspirations for doing so?
I think the key for me, if I can just jump in, is, kind of as I was saying, like I've worked on projects and clients that like are really not something that is like of my like personal like top tier interest, but coming to that project with an open mind and like a thirst to like learn about like what makes that brand or artist or community special to the fans or the consumers of whatever it is super super important. And those projects are harder because it's like you have to kind of do a lot of learning yourself. But I think first of all, that just makes you a better person to come to things with an open mind and learning. Two, I think it helps you kind of like see a different perspective on something and bring a new perspective to a project that a current fan or a current follower might not have. So yeah, did that answer the question? Exactly. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think it, for me, and just like in my experience, it's all about knowing your audience really well, and just being really tapped into like your demographic is really helpful when it comes to knowing how to cater to them and seeing like what they want to see or figuring out what they want to see and what they want to read about and stuff like that. Yeah, like, and you see it like on Twitter and stuff, like you see brands like trying to be relatable and then, you know, people roasting them on Twitter and stuff. And so that's like every social manager's like worst nightmare. But I think it goes back to just, you know, creating that relationship with your demographic and your audience and just really knowing, you know, their likes and dislikes and, you know, just not posting things. And then if it doesn't work and keep posting them, like instead of that, like pivot to something else. Like if this isn't working, what else can I do? And like what other angle can we take here? If that's not working out. But yeah, I like having like that connection with audience, because as someone who like grew up like on Twitter and MySpace and whatever, I feel like from my perspective, I feel like I know what I want to see from a user, and I try to like keep that in mind as I'm figuring out my strategy.
Yeah, totally. I'm the same. It's like if I don't necessarily, I don't know, love the thing that I'm working on, I'll think, okay, well, what would make me as a user interested and want to read this caption? So, and agree with everything else you guys were both saying.
And just two little tidbits. We are going to have a Q&A in a few. So if you could save your questions and PM me directly with your questions, because I'll ask them for you. You can start doing that now. I do have a couple more questions, but if you have questions for the panelists, please PM me directly. If you don't PM me directly, I won't see it. Thank you. So we'll open up the floor for Q&A in a second. So before we do that, and before we get into some visuals, because I do want to make sure that we can talk a little, like see the work that you actually worked on and talk through that a little bit. This is kind of a two-part question, if we can make it concise. But what do you feel, my first question is, what do you feel is the future of social media as it relates to entertainment, creative, or our culture? Like what direction do you feel like it's headed? Because I feel like this is such a vague, complex beast simultaneously, and it's changing every day. But in your personal opinion and experience, what do you feel is the future of social media? And then also, why is it so important for brands and companies to prioritize social media? Like if they're not prioritizing it, what are they missing out on? Sorry, I know that was a lot. So if you need me to repeat it, I'm happy to.
My first thought is that, many thoughts to what you just said. I think social media it's really kind of, first of all, it's kind of the new go-to place for entertainment. Like that's where people go first before they go to the TV, before they go to the movie theater nowadays. So we need to think about it as kind of like the primary distribution, channel. Unfortunately, I hate to say that because I'm such a movie buff and stay true to kind of like go into the theaters, and it pains me to see them kind of like start to fall to the wayside. But it's true. Social is like, it's in your pocket all the time. Like, so it really is kind of like our main form of entertainment and information. And in that way, you know, I think that a lot of companies need to treat it as like their website and their portfolio. You know, I think sometimes we've worked with companies whose website is their, you know, their primary kind of focus, but in reality, most people I know will go check a brand's Instagram before they go to the website, to see what they have to say and hear their voice. So I think that, you know, it really is the front lines, kind of as I mentioned previously, and, you know, putting your best foot forward and looking your best, and, you know, really putting out what you want to say on social is super important, for anyone really, but specifically for brands and artists and anyone in any kind of larger company.
Yeah, it's the first thing you're going to notice. It's going to be how people associate your company or your brand, and that's a lot of pressure on one hand, but also I really love how everyone, from just like an independent freelance average user to like huge Fortune 500 companies, their platform is all the same. Like everyone has the same bones when you open and create an Instagram account. It's just, what do you do with it? And so I really do like the fact that anyone can truly work in social media and climb the ranks there just by, staying kind of what we were saying, staying authentic, finding your voice, and consistency too. I think the algorithm absolutely loves consistency. So staying on top of it. But yeah, I mean, it's something that in the future, I think will be where it will be like the new internet, because right now we can buy things on Instagram. We can shop on Instagram. We can listen to music. We can watch videos. It's going to be Amazon. So for me, I'm excited because working in the film and TV space on social media, I foresee kind of like TikTok, and I mean, Quibi, RIP, when that was a thing, but like, I feel like Instagram will have its own series of just like, you go to Instagram to watch a show, and that's exciting. I think just the more content, the better. Although I am also a theater purist, so that does kind of pain me to say that too. But yeah, I mean, the more the merrier also.
Yeah, I think from like an editorial perspective, a lot of publications are moving from print to digital. And so social media becomes like the new newsstand. Like that's where people are going to see like your cover stories or like what your news that you're putting out and stuff. So it's absolutely crucial in the editorial space to have a social media presence. As far as the future of social media, I feel like I honestly don't know, because it changes so rapidly and so quickly, and you just really have to pivot to whatever like the new thing is. But it's like also really interesting to see all these different platforms sort of like becoming each other. Like, you know, Be Real came out and TikTok has like Be Real on TikTok now, and you know, Instagram has Snapchat stories and stuff like that. Like they're all like molding into like the same thing. So I don't know if that's gonna like continue to fatigue people, and these companies will have to like pivot away from that. But it'll be interesting to see like what happens in the future, because it's always changing, and I think it also depends on the users, because the users are the ones that sort of inform what they like and don't like, and how that goes for the platform too.
For sure. Thank you for sharing. So now I want to get into some visuals very briefly, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions. I see them coming in. Thank you. If you have questions, please private message me and I'll do my best to get to them. So very briefly, I'm going to have each panelist just share a little bit about, you know, talk you through briefly what they do, but show you visually some of the decks, websites, social media sites they've worked on, so you can get like a vibe. Like, you know, I'm a vibe person. We want to see things. So we'll start with Morgan, if she could share a screen, and if we could just keep this 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll get to questions after.
Yes, sounds good to me. Okay, so let's see. Here is the Pretty Bird Instagram. So this was a fun post. So, okay, here's a good example. Here's a really funny spot that we did with Eric Wareheim for Little Caesars Pizza. And it's in the reel format. And I'm kind of surprised by the number of likes here. Usually there's more. So maybe just the timing of the post was a bit off. But when we had Daniels with their best director win, best film win for the Oscars, this got 3,000. So the difference between these two posts is what happens. You know, you can't really predict it, but it's just a good way to show that sometimes things will perform better than you expect, and sometimes they will perform less. A lot of this is video heavy because we are a video primarily company. So there's a lot of reels here. A lot of our commercials are up here. For Ventureland, let me see if I can pull this up. So this is a movie studio that I'm also, doing socials for. And here we have a couple trailers that I've pinned to the top. These are just series that are coming out in the next week or two. This one, it's fairly new in a sense, as we're trying to hone in still on like what the brand identity of Ventureland is. So right now it's a lot of kind of posters and stills and clips from reviews and things, some of the awards that we've won here. I did also want to bring up really quickly, I'm also a film critic, and this is a site that I run with my brother, and Jasper has actually helped in the past too. Very fun. But one thing here that was kind of a testament to just staying truthful and organic with your content is I covered the Film Independent Spirit Awards about a month ago, and I caught this moment of Paul Mescal hugging his co-star. It was very sweet, and we posted this on Instagram thinking nothing of it. And we've got way more likes on this video than like anything we've gotten on the page ever. And it just was this moment that my brother and I truly liked ourselves and thought, oh, this is so sweet. We enjoy this. Let's post it. Maybe other people will too. And we still get notifications to this day that like thousands of people are liking this and sharing it. And I would have never thought, but that is, that's kind of funny to me. But anyway, that is my screen share. Let me see if I can get out of it now.
Thank you, Morgan. That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to log out. Oh, here. Okay, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Ernestine, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. 1 second. Okay. So this is Teen Vogue's Instagram account. This is sort of like my current baby that I like oversee over. Here's a couple of examples of just like different things we cover in the highlights. So we had our editorial team go to New York Fashion Week, and we covered that on social. We covered like the midterms, and we worked with a couple of Gen Z organizations for that. So it's just a mix of different things that we do. One thing I will show you is something that we did today that I was super proud of. We collaborated with our sister brand, Them, for a Trans Day of Visibility. And we did a video with the publication and featured a bunch of different talent just to send a special message to trans kids for today, especially with everything going on. But yeah, we work on different projects. We'll collaborate with other brands within Condé Nast to do things. We focus a lot on video, text, kind of try to do it all, and also making sure that we're also covering like the important topics within like politics and stuff like that too.
Last but not least, Jasper. Thank you, Ernestine.
Yeah, one sec. So I'll share a couple different things. The biggest account that I'm involved in is we manage the accounts for Coachella, which is happening in a couple weeks. Maybe some of you will be there. And yeah, Coachella's been a really interesting project. I grew up going to Coachella, so it was kind of like a dream to like work on it and to be able to work on it. And a lot of what we do with I think Coachella it's an interesting brand because there's a lot of different like conceptions about it. Like for some people, it's just about like the music. For some people, it's just like this event that they go to and take photos, and there's like a big influencer culture to it. So it's interesting to like try to have to find like a middle ground to like for all the different kinds of attendees who go to this show. So we do is every year we kind of sit together and say like, well, how do we want this to look? Like, what's the color palette? Like, and that's something that's really cool about an event that happens year over year is you can kind of like have like a clear like differentiation of what do we want to do differently this year as opposed to something that is just like continuing along. So, for this year, we kind of identified like, what's our color palette? What's, what do we want? Do we want it to be a lot more photo forward? We want to try to keep like more graphic stuff off the feed. How do we want to show artists on the feed in the lead up to the show? So a lot of what we do is kind of based around those tools we set in January once the announce hits and all the way to the lead up to the show. There's some cool stuff from last year that will just take too long to scroll through, but that I would probably want to show you. But a really big thing we did last year that was super successful that I'll try to find, but might be tough. Oh, this might be a good one. Was so our biggest partner on the show is YouTube. And so what we did was we decided to, hey, let's poll every day. Let's pull like 3 or 4 just like really strong clips from the live stream. But really identify these just like key moments of like the show and direct to the live stream and try to use the collaborator feature, which was brand new at the time. Actually, this post that I pulled up doesn't use that feature. But this is Carol G and J Balvin, which was a big moment at the show. And it was a really, we realized as the show was going on, we were like, wow, we're getting a lot of international attention this year. Like, how do we lean into posting about artists who are international and have really large international fan bases? So finding these like clips that would speak to those audiences really helped us, in the long run, and really kind of identified a new path for the show in some ways of like, oh yeah, we can lean into kind of that international side in the booking and who we put on the live stream. So that's Coachella. And then I'll also show, sorry, the control panel is kind of hiding. And a lot of what we do too is very like design focused. Apologies, this is an older deck. I couldn't find our newest one. But this is just kind of like a quick summation of some of the other clients we've worked for. Discogs, as I mentioned before, was a client we worked with for 3 years. And they kind of just wanted like a refresh of like what they, how they showed up on editorial, how they showed up on social. So we really kind of took like their existing brand elements and we're like, let's turn it into something really fun and flashy and eye-catching on social. They had a few partnerships with Spotify that we worked on as well, and how to in the KPI was like, how do we get people to, come to the site? We want people to, really come to the site and not read it on social. So that was a big kind of way of like, how do we make this like, how do we show up on social in a way that people are like, oh, that's very eye-popping, I want to see more of this. And then this is an interesting one, kind of early pandemic. We were when record stores had to shut down for a few months, and we were like, how do we support record stores in a way that feels appropriate for social? So what we did was we were like, let's do a series we called it Homespun, which was having artists and vinyl selectors do live stream video performances, which at the time Facebook Live, Instagram Live were really popping off. How do we pivot to social to support these shops, which will really support Discogs on social, but also a donation feature that will really help these shops that have had to close down and do some kind of good for the community in that regard. And then this is another one. We also have an original brand at Versus Creative. It's a kind of an intentional, we call it an intentional listening label. It's called Off Air. It's an event series and label that does a lot of music in the meditation and kind of intentional listening space. So this is some branding, we put together. This is mostly for the show series, but we do this in New York a few times a year. And then, yeah, a bunch of other stuff too, but we'll get to the Q&A.
Very cool. Thank you so much. And we're going to jump into these questions because we have good ones and I want to make sure I get through as many as possible. But for our panelists, I always like to kind of wrap the question discussion with this. If you have any resources that aspiring social media experts should tap into, this could be handles, accounts they should check out, websites, initiatives, cool articles you came across, clubs, forums, job boards, anything that you can think of that's something tangible that they can tap into to keep their interest alive or to connect to opportunities, please drop it in the chat through the rest of the conversation, because everyone here is going to save the chat, right? Because there's some helpful information in this chat. So I'll just ask that of the panelists because we want to make sure that they walk away with more information, but also applicable resources that they could tap into. All right, let's get into these questions. Anyone can answer them. Let's just try and keep the answers concise so we can get through as many as possible. The first one asks, I have a question for the Q&A. What programs or metrics do you all use to measure engagement? Also, how do you measure if a post is successful?
I think the programs are always different. I feel like every company uses like a different program. Currently, I use this analytic tool called Dash Hudson, and that's it's a tool that does scheduling, and it also helps us keep track of analytics. We try to look at to see how our impressions are doing, as well as the engagement, and seeing, measuring those two are something that helps us see what a successful post looks like.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment? Good. Okay. Next one says, I think about social media as a distribution channel. And as a person with no following, is there value in releasing content for free? For me, I'm nervous about building a presence and running empty for a few months and having nothing to show for it.
I think, yeah, I think that's what has to be done in a way. I mean, if you're not creating something, there's nothing to show for it. And if you're looking to bring a portfolio of work to a potential employer or to a brand to maybe do freelance for them, like you kind of need to have something that they can look back on and see what you're capable of doing. So I don't think it's wasted time by any means. I think creating, it's also going to be, maybe you learn new ways to do something, or you experiment with different tools, or, it's always just kind of a learning process. So it is difficult. Like I said, it's kind of hard to be creative every single day. But it will push you to just be a better content creator.
Thank you. Next question says, how much does one's personal social media play a role in landing a position, if at all?
Personally, not at all. I think it's more in your creative projects that you're working on that people are looking at. So, like having a portfolio that shows the work that you've done is super helpful, but I don't think you personally need to have like a big social media presence in order to be like working in social media.
Yeah, I agree. More followers doesn't mean you're better at social media. Don't get tricked into thinking that. What makes you really good at social media is a kind of like an open mind and, engaged kind of, and that you're engaged in kind of just like the goings on of the world. But I don't think that like you should feel pressured to use your personal social media as a way to prove you're good at social. That's just not sustainable for your well-being, I don't think. I think the division is important between the two.
Don't put that pressure on yourself.
Hard agree.
Oh, go ahead, Morgan.
No, I hard agree. Like my social media personally is very sad. Like I haven't posted in months, but that doesn't mean I don't post every single day for work. So it doesn't matter at all. There's no correlation.
That's actually a really good question. Next question is Facebook on its way out or on the come up again?
Facebook is, I think we get this question a lot at work. It depends on how you look at it. A lot of clients we have are what we call legacy artist clients. So like artists who are not performing anymore or have passed away. And they do anything we post on there does really well on Facebook because it's a lot of older fans. You know, for Tom Petty is one that like does really, really, really well on Facebook. So I think there's an audience there that will be there for a very long time because they have already ingrained themselves into that platform and found community there. Same with Instagram, same with TikTok. I think once an audience kind of like familiarizes themselves with the platform, they're going to be there for a while. So as a platform as a whole, like, yeah, I think it's probably reached its peak, but there will always be an audience there to speak to if your brand or artist or whatever should reach them.
Yeah, it makes me sad because I remember when Facebook was new, but now it's out. But also something to keep in mind is the whole like metaverse thing. That's something we're just starting, and who knows the potential that could unlock with social media. So as far as Facebook as how we know it right now, yeah, maybe that shouldn't be like priority number one, but I wouldn't count it out completely because I think there's a lot of things brewing behind the scenes that it will be very, very important to be aware of.
Thank you. Next question. How often should you update your portfolio, especially when you're working for one company? What do you include, especially when you're working on a social media campaign with a team?
I think it's important to update it fairly regularly, like once a year, I think is like a reasonable kind of goal to set. And then working with a team too, I mean, this is a very tricky question. I think it's just really important to kind of like, even in your portfolio, kind of be very specific about what you did. Like if you were not like, say, the director on a video, or you were not the like editor on a video, or the lead designer on something, you know, just be honest about what you did on a specific project. Because even being part of something shows that you are, you know, you understand the process that went into something that's really great, and will allow you to speak to that, even if you weren't kind of like the full brains behind it, so to speak, or the final kind of end all be all.
Perfect. Thank you, Jasper. We have time for a couple more. What are some factors that people might not take into account when they are pursuing this type of career? Any decisions that you had to take to get to where you are that made you second guess your career?
It's a 24/7 job in a way, which is exciting. It also learning how to set maybe boundaries just for your own sanity is also nice. But yeah, it is something that being online, like we are connected all the time with our phone. There's kind of no excuse for us to not be able to do something. So that's something that, you know, is great because your post can reach people 24/7, 365, but also if you're the one that's creating it, you kind of may feel this responsibility that you have to be on just as much. So learning to take breaks, when the workday ends, maybe logging out of Instagram or TikTok or whatever would be nice. But yeah, it's a fine line, I think.
Okay, last question. What would you suggest as a first step for someone with no social media experience at all who wants to get into the field?
I would say, like, again, just be on social media, see what people are talking about, see what like trends are going on. And from there, you can kind of figure out like what it is you want to do in social media too, because there's also just different things to do in social media. So if you want to be a strategist, like I think just narrowing down what it is you want to do is important. And then from there, you can sort of like figure out the next step to take.
And Oh, go ahead, Jasper, go ahead.
Just real quickly, just expanding off that, like also finding the communities in social that you want to be involved with. I think it's important too. I think wanting to be involved in social media is kind of like saying you want to be involved in the world in a weird way. Because the world is living on social media now. So it's really finding the kind of like pockets of social that you want to be involved with, and where you think your voice will shine. And how you think you can, be of value and contribute to the conversation, I think is really, really important as well.
And I'll just piggyback before we close and say that Google is the homie, okay? Google is the homie. Literally, you can go on Google and I would just look at job descriptions, social media manager, marketing, strategy, and literally just go through the job description and then kind of play with what stands out to you, what you would enjoy doing, because there's not one role in social media, it's not universal. So get on Google. In the age of information, ignorance is a choice. So get on Google and then just do your research and figure out what you want to do that way as well, okay? So we are at the end of our time. Yes, 1:15. Staying on time. I want to thank our panelists first and foremost for taking time out of your busy schedules to drop the gems and the nuggets and the knowledge. We appreciate you so very much. We need more champions like this in this space. And I want to thank everyone who took the time out to invest in your future and your craft by attending this panel today. Have a wonderful weekend. Happy Friday. And like I said, don't forget to follow the CSU EA. It's in the chat. And also pipelines for when we launch next month. These are two very great resources for students, alum, and talent, and feel free to share out as well. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great weekend. Bye.